So earlier today, I finished Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson, which is the first book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. And this book has a big reputation for being like the Dark Souls of fantasy. But I don't necessarily think that is deserved. At least this book doesn't deserve that title. Uh, I'll be honest, I don't think that this book is incredibly difficult, and I think that the reputation that it has turns a lot of people away from a very, very good fantasy book. So let's just get straight into it. I only have one con, and that is personal thing. I just wish we spent more time with some of the individual characters throughout the story, because the way Steven Erikson writes this book is like a bunch of short stories with each character. So like every chapter probably has around 5 points of view, and you switch between them like every 2, 3, 4 paragraphs, like that. Like it'll be like 3 pages of one character, and then boom, another character, and then boom, another character, and then boom, another character. And while I really like the fact that this kind of keeps the action up throughout the story, I also kind of want to know more about all of these characters. And this book unfortunately suffers because it really does switch super quickly, and sometimes it's kind of jarring because you're like, at one time you're following, an average soldier, and then the next thing you know, you're in the mind of a talking raven. And it was just kind of jarring at points. But as soon as you adjust to that, this book is magnificent. Like, it's nothing but prose besides that. And that's a personal thing. If you're into this, and I'm sure the more I read of this series, the more I'll be into it, then it's not really a con. What are the pros, though? Like, why should you read this? First off, Steven Erikson, when it comes to just willing to go there in fantasy, goating. This dude does not pretend that this genre is some like, there are dragons, but they're like, it's like a little small lizard, or it's like, it's magic, but there's all these rules and regulations and people can't really use it the way that like is cool in effect. No, dude, no. The magic can just do whatever he wants it to. There are dragons. There are people who can literally transform into dragons in this book because they have dragon blood. There is an undead army. There is a buttload of races that you are not going to keep straight, at least in the first book. There's the Tista Andi, and there's like the Telanai Mass, and then there's like the Bagras, and I know I'm butchering those names, but there are like a billion races. And I mean, this dude just goes there. In the first like 3 chapters, you get a battle between a floating moon, not a literal moon, but basically this thing they call moon spawn, and a bunch of mages fighting against it. And it is the most insane thing you're ever going to read. Like, a demon shows up on the field and kills a bunch of people, and then there's like firefights, literally firefights between wizards and stuff. It just goes there. There is a talking puppet in this book that is going crazy. It's losing its mind, and it has the soul of an actual person inside it. That is not a spoiler. That is something that happens within the first 3 chapters, dude. This book is just willing to go there when it comes to fantasy concepts. And as someone who got into fantasy because I like the weird stuff, I like the stuff that is just off the wall, I like the talking lizard people, you know what I mean? This is that, dude. If you're looking for truly epic fantasy, in every sense of the word, this series does it. The world building here, the history here is absolutely incredible, and I'm only getting like little crumbs here and there in just this book, and I can't wait to explore more of like what's going on, because there's hundreds of thousands of years of history here that are slowly kind of being explored. They're kind of like, they're giving you a little taste. Stephen's giving you a little taste throughout, but it's just like insane, dude. I mean, it's nuts, and every like place you go to in this book, you can feel it. You can feel how breathed and lived in it is. You know, when we go to Jerusalem, which is like the major city that this book takes place in, you can feel like it's a living city. There are so many cool concepts just in Jerusalem alone that are just mind-blowing. Like there's wires specifically for thieves to run across at night. There are entire assassins guilds with their own rules. There are mages ruling the city. It's like insane. The entire city is run on like this giant gas bubble that allows the city to have like these cool ass blue flames to light the streets at night. Like it's super cool. The magic is really cool. It can basically do anything, it seems. I mean, there are people flying around, there are people turning invisible, there's obviously like the traditional like fireball spell and stuff like that, but like you also have like souls getting transferred, you have all sorts of just crazy nuts stuff. Like you have demons being like locked inside like little little vials and stuff. It's crazy. Like it's completely insane. And he just goes there. And I think I have to credit him for being such a strong writer, because he makes it all like believable. Like within the world of Malazan, it all makes sense. It's never like, oh, this dragon just showed up and I guess it's in the story now. No, it's there and you can understand why it's there, and it just works. The characters, another great thing about this book. A lot of people are like, oh, this isn't like super character driven, and it is and it isn't. But I do think that Erikson, what he does with characters is really, really well done. This is probably the first cast of characters where I can say every single character, every single point of view character, and even probably every single side character that I can remember, I enjoyed in this book. There isn't a single bad character in this entire book. There's some characters that kind of annoyed me at the beginning. There are characters I don't like or think are interesting as others, but everyone is good in this book. Also, the humor is incredible. He's very subtle with it. It's not Joe Abercrombie where he's going to make you laugh like every other sentence, but it's kind of like this dry, witty, just really, really funny humor, and if it works for you, I think it's really going to work for you. I'll also say just immediately, this prose is magnificent. Erikson knows how to paint a scene. There's like a battle, I'll say, at the beginning of this book, before the major siege on Pale, that happens, and the way he describes like the dead bodies, like I was like, oh, that's like really vivid. It's not like grotesque, but it's vivid enough to like get in your brain and for you to remember, like, hey, war is messed up, and the deaths that you're experiencing are messed up, and you're supposed to feel that. It never feels like, oh, just 1,000 people died and we're going to cut to the next scene. No, he's gonna make you live it. He's gonna make you feel it. Yeah, this book slapped. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it given its reputation. I really thought I would get in, start reading it, get to like the halfway point or get to the end and be like, alright, I don't need to read any more of these books. I'm good now. I see why it's so difficult, I see why certain people like it, but it's not for me. But it turns out this is really exactly my type of book. Like, this was awesome to read. This is epic fantasy done to almost perfection, in my opinion. And this is just the first book, which, according to the fans, is one of the worst ones. So we're so in. I gave it like an 8.8 out of 10. I highly recommend Gardens of the Moon. Please read this. This is awesome. This deserves way more praise than it gets. And I'll be reviewing the rest.